There is a story that Mike Tyson himself has told for decades. A story about a 14-year-old boy sitting in front of a television, watching the man he idolized most in the entire world get destroyed. He didn't just watch it, he cried over it. And the very next morning, his trainer made him a promise that would take 8 years to keep. This is the story of how that broken teenager grew up to settle the score. October 2nd, 1980, Las Vegas, Nevada. Muhammad Ali, the greatest heavyweight boxer the world had ever seen, stepped into the ring one more time. His opponent was Larry Holmes, his own former sparring partner, a fighter who had once looked up to Ali as a mentor and now stood across from him as the reigning heavyweight champion of the world. What happened that night was not a fight. It was closer to a tragedy.
It's October 2nd, 1980. Ali fights Larry Holmes.
Ali, well past his prime and suffering from health issues that had not yet been publicly understood, was battered for round after round. Holmes, visibly reluctant to hurt a man he idolized, still had no choice but to do his job. He landed clean shots. He controlled every round, and Ali, the man who had once floated and stung his way past every opponent in the world, had nothing left to answer with. By the 10th round, Ali's corner had seen enough. The fight was stopped. For the first time in his career, Muhammad Ali failed to answer the bell, unable to continue against a former student who clearly took no joy in what he had just been forced to do.
He's the greatest. He can say he's the greatest. You can say he's the greatest.
Watching this fight, hundreds of miles away, was a 14-year-old boy from Brooklyn, a troubled kid with a difficult past, recently placed into the care of a boxing trainer named Cus D'Amato. That boy's name was Mike Tyson. Tyson had grown up idolizing Ali. In a life defined by chaos, poverty, and constant trouble, Ali represented something larger than boxing. He was proof that a black man could be undeniable, unapologetic, and untouchable at the same time. Watching him get dismantled by Holmes broke something inside the teenage Tyson. The next morning, Cus D'Amato found the young fighter in tears. Not because of a fight Tyson had lost himself, but because of what he had witnessed happen to the man he admired more than anyone else on earth. D'Amato, a trainer who had spent his life studying not just boxing technique but the psychology of fighters, understood exactly what he was looking at. He saw a kid whose grief could either break him or become fuel, and rather than simply comfort Tyson and move on, D'Amato made him a promise. One day, Tyson would face Larry Holmes himself, and when that day came, he would make Holmes pay for what happened to Ali. From that day forward, something shifted in Tyson's training. He wasn't just working to become a boxer. He was working toward a very specific, very personal mission, one built on loyalty to a hero and a promise made by the only father figure he had ever truly trusted. Years passed. Tyson rose through the amateur ranks with terrifying speed and power, turning professional at 18 and demolishing opponent after opponent in the earliest rounds. By the time he was 20 years old, he had become the youngest heavyweight champion in history. But one name remained on his mind, unfinished business tied to a promise made years earlier by a man who was no longer alive to see it fulfilled. Cus D'Amato had passed away before Tyson ever got his title shot against Holmes. January 22nd, 1988, Atlantic City, New Jersey. Mike Tyson, now the unified heavyweight champion of the world, stood across the ring from Larry Holmes. The same Larry Holmes who had beaten Ali 8 years earlier. Holmes was older now, well past his own prime, attempting one final comeback in a career winding down. For Tyson, this was never just another title defense. This was the moment Cus D'Amato had promised him 8 years earlier, standing in that gym after watching Ali crumble. This was the mission he had carried through years of training, through the loss of his mentor, through his own rise from a troubled kid in Brooklyn to the most feared heavyweight on the planet. The bell rang, and Tyson attacked with a level of intensity that went beyond simple boxing strategy. Every combination, every step forward, every punch carried the weight of a promise made nearly a decade earlier. Then, in the final moments of the fourth round, Tyson delivered the finishing blow, a devastating right hand that sent Holmes crashing down again, this time unable to beat the count. The referee waved the fight off. Mike Tyson had done it. The arena erupted, but for Tyson, this victory carried a different kind of weight than any of his previous knockouts. This wasn't just another title defense against a name from boxing's past. This was the fulfillment of a promise made by a man who had saved him from a life of almost certain ruin. A promise made on a devastating morning 8 years earlier, when a heartbroken teenager watched his hero fall. In the years that followed, Tyson would speak often about that night, about the connection between watching Ali suffer as a teenager and finally closing that chapter as a champion himself. It became one of the defining emotional threads of his early career, a reminder that behind the intimidating persona and the devastating knockouts was a kid who had once cried over what happened to his hero and never forgot the promise made to make it right. Cus D'Amato never lived to see that night in Atlantic City. He never got to watch the promise he made to a devastated 14-year-old actually come true. But in every combination Tyson threw that night, in every step forward, in the intensity that even seasoned commentators noticed was different from his usual fights, D'Amato's influence was unmistakable. To truly understand the weight of that moment, you have to understand what D'Amato actually represented in Tyson's life. Before meeting him, Tyson had been in and out of juvenile detention, a kid seemingly destined for a life defined by the streets of Brooklyn rather than the boxing ring. D'Amato didn't just teach him technique. He gave him structure, discipline, and for the first time in his life, someone who genuinely believed he could become something greater than his circumstances suggested. That context makes the promise about Ali even more significant. D'Amato wasn't simply motivating a young fighter with a random goal. He was connecting Tyson's personal pain, his grief over watching his hero fall, directly into the discipline and purpose that would define his entire career. Every early morning run, every hour in the gym, every sacrifice Tyson made as a teenager carried a thread back to that promise made in the aftermath of Ali's loss. D'Amato passed away in November of 1985, just months before Tyson turned professional. He never got to corner him for a single fight as a title holder. He never got to see the young man he had rescued become heavyweight champion of the world. For Tyson, this loss added another layer of meaning to everything that followed, including the eventual fight with Holmes. Some who were close to the situation believe that Tyson's relentless drive during those early championship years, the ferocity that made him must-watch television every time he stepped into the ring, was inseparable from his desire to prove D'Amato right. Every knockout wasn't just a title defense. It was validation for a man who had staked his final years on believing in a troubled kid nobody else wanted to take a chance on. The Holmes fight, then, wasn't simply about avenging Ali. It was about honoring everything D'Amato had built in that small gym in Catskill, New York, where a broken teenager first found purpose. It was about proving that the promise made on that emotional morning had not been forgotten, even with the man who made it no longer there to witness its fulfillment. Muhammad Ali's career had already ended by the time Tyson beat Holmes. Nothing about that fight changed what had happened to Ali 8 years earlier. The damage, both physical and to his legacy in that specific bout, could never be undone. But for a young champion who had once idolized him from a distance, defeating the man responsible for that painful night carried a meaning that went far beyond a simple boxing record. It was proof that Tyson had kept his word. It was proof that Cus D'Amato's belief in him, planted during that emotional morning years earlier, had not been misplaced. And it was proof that even the most devastating losses in boxing history could eventually be answered, not through revenge in the literal sense, but through the discipline and loyalty of a kid who refused to forget where his love for the sport had first begun. And that is why, decades later, people still remember the story of a heartbroken teenager who cried over his fallen hero and grew up to keep a promise nobody else even knew he had made.